All right, it's a pleasure having you back right here on the Rise News channel this morning. We got some stories out of Korea this morning, out of Geneva, I should say, that Korea has apparently decided to withdraw the minister Yoo Min-hyun from the World Trade Organization Director General running, paving the way for Nigeria's former Finance Minister Okonjo-Iweala to be confirmed as the head of the World Trade Body. WTO has learned. That's Washington Trade Daily. Seoul is expected to announce its decision to withdraw its minister, Yoo, in the coming days to enable World Trade Organization's General Counsel to appoint Ms. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala and said people familiar within the development. Korea has already conveyed its decision to the United States, which has been insisting on the selection of Ms. Yoo. Part of the reason for the position adopted by Washington against Ms. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala was that she's seen as close to the Democratic Party, said a person familiar with the selection process. And Washington refused to accept the recommendation made by the selection panel chaired by General Counsel Chair Ambassador David Walker that Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala is the candidate most likely of the two to attract consensus. But she clearly carried the largest support by members in the final round and clearly enjoyed broad support from members across all levels of development from all geographic regions. Ms. Yoo from Korea failed to receive enough support from members of all levels of development, developing and developed nations, and at least developing countries, as well as geographical spread in comparison to the largest support received by Mrs. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala. Ambassador Walker has also scheduled a GC meeting for November 9, which was postponed after the Geneva Canton imposed a new restriction on meetings in the face of the sudden surge in COVID-19 cases. Most of the WTO meetings are largely held virtually through the internet platform. So in order to make the decision about the GC, a quorum of 82 members must be present at the meeting. The GC meeting is scheduled to take place on December 17, but it is not clear whether the meeting can take place based on the current restrictions to continue next month. But this is just some news coming out of Geneva this morning about Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala poised. I mean, it's a day of good stories, felicitations, and celebrations from head boy to Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala today. Dr. Abati, you would have a slant on this.
This dapper man on my left, looking amazing.
Maybe you want to comment on the story first?
Well, I hope it's confirmed. That's all I can say. I really hope and pray that it actually does happen, because you've read it all, haven't you? Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala was the runaway favorite. Yeah. So I do hope that South Korea does the right thing and just withdraws their candidate, because really she had the backing. There was only America as the only holdout, so that the WHO can just achieve their customary consensus and we can celebrate.
Yeah.
Well, you know, yesterday the Washington Trade Daily already reported that South Korea was likely to withdraw its candidate. That's Ms. Yoo. And you recall that after the initial process and the voting ended, Okonjo-Iweala got 110 votes out of 64. And, you know, Ms. Yoo just got about 62 or 64, right? You know, I mean, a very small number. But at that time, the main problem was the objection of the United States. Yeah. The United States trying to exercise a veto power that it does not have.
It's not the US.
We were thus said at that time that it was just the United States trying to exercise powers that it did not have. And that paragraph 20, in the event of the U.S. remaining difficult, since the WTO Director General is chosen by consensus, then if the voting took place, then automatically, you know, Okonjo-Iweala will still get there. But with this news now that South Korea has withdrawn their candidate, that leaves the field open. And I think it's appropriate at this time to begin to congratulate Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala and congratulate the Nigerian government and personally President Muhammadu Buhari, who committed himself to ensuring that Nigeria gets that position. It's now only a matter of time for the General Council of the WTO to just ratify, and the consensus will have been established. And once that is done, the next assignment for Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, already, of course, she has a sound frame of mind in terms of what the priorities will be. You know, how do you reform the WTO? How do you deal with the outstanding councils that the Trump administration has been blocking, particularly the judicial bodies, you know, the arbitration bodies? How do you deal with the uncompleted trade round negotiations? So all of this, she has a job cut out for her. And then also, how do you deal with U.S., China, and the trade war and the implications for global trade? So, well, we wish her well. And as I said the other time, the Ashwebi will soon be available.
Oh, yeah?
And all of us will be on the way to Geneva, dancing from Lagos to Geneva.
And I'm sure
to honor and celebrate Dr. Okonjo-Iweala.
And the soundtrack, Dr. Abati, will probably be Pepe Dem.
Yeah.
Your favorite.
That's all on news headlines. Take a short break now. We'll return. We'll have the trio of Rotos, Michael, and Aero to give us updates on Africa, global business, and COVID-19. Stay with us. All right, welcome back to the morning show right here on the Rise News channel. Rotos, it's over to you this morning for everything business. Africa business update, I should say.
Yes, good morning, Rufai. Good morning, Doctor. Good morning, Tundu. Kicking off, it's understood that Priti Patel, who is the current UK Home Secretary, is under scrutiny for backing PNID, Process and Industrial Development, the company that's been in courts with the Nigerian government over the agreement in the previous administration to set up a gas plant, which never happened. The company claimed that the Nigerian government never supplied the gas. They won a judgment in arbitration to the tune of about $10 billion. The Nigerian government won a decision by a London judge in September to appeal that decision. And the Nigerian government, of course, in recently won incremental victories against PNID. So it's interesting, although I should point out that she apparently backed the company before she was appointed by Boris Johnson to be Home Secretary. And she's been facing a number of issues recently. I think she was accused of breaking the ministerial code of conduct in the UK and bullying her staff. And now this coming to light, the optics aren't good for her with respect to this, it coming to light that she was backing the PNID company in the past. In fact, apparently 3 times she tried to intervene on behalf of the company. So it places more, of a light on her and also on the case. And it doesn't look good for the company as well with respect to what proceedings that are currently in court. But again, just to emphasize, this was before she became UK Home Secretary appointed by Boris Johnson. So it's interesting development there. In Nigeria, still in Nigeria, the federal government at the 26th Annual National Economic Summit Group, President Buhari, who was represented by Vice President Osibanjo, said that the government is actually looking to introduce policies that will instruct them to purchase locally assembled vehicles. And this is in order to be able to boost the auto manufacturing sector. In the 2020 finance bill, there is, of course, a directive to reduce import duties on vehicles from 35% to 10% to reduce the cost of bringing vehicles into the country. But this is a really good move, because what they're doing here, if you think back to when Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu, Lagos State Governor, unveiled that electric car from the Stallion Group, there was a lot of talk about how that's going to produce jobs, create demand for these locally assembled vehicles, and it's a good move. So with the government, we've been calling a lot for government to patronize the sector. I think currently annual demand for vehicles is about 720,000. Only about 14 to 20,000 of that number are locally assembled cars. So it will be good to see the federal government actively engaged in trying to purchase these vehicles. Is hopefully going to create more jobs. The issue, of course, is whether they can meet demand. This is like any other project, whether it is to increase the production of rice or increase the production of anything else. Can locally assembled players in the sector meet the annual demand, and then can they also produce or assemble vehicles of the same quality as the brands that are overseas? So it's a big competitive market. The Germans are there, the Asians are there, the North Americans are there, the Chinese are there. So it's going to be an interesting space. But going forward, look, it will take some time. This is not going to happen tomorrow. But, with the government signaling their interest, again, this was at the 26th edition of the Nigerian Economic Summit group, them wanting to purchase locally assembled cars, it's a good move. And then the NCC, Communication Commission, which is under the Federal Ministry of Communications, they apparently had their Twitter account suspended. There are reasons vary as to why, but their account has been restored. They just put this tweet out saying that the NCC is committed to serving Nigerians. Our Twitter handle is restored. The temporary suspension was taken by Twitter to ensure the safety of all our stakeholders. And they say you can always reach us and the addresses for the body. But it was a little alarming as to why it was that they were suspended. Twitter suspends accounts either because of spam or because they pose some kind of threats to users or for a number of reasons. But the account's been restored. And then finally, you already talked about this with respect to yet to be confirmed news that the South Koreans are looking at withdrawing the candidacy of you. I actually saw this one. The Washington Trade Daily is an account that looks at international trade news. So they also are putting this up there again, that the Koreans plan to withdraw Trade Minister Yu from the race for the WTO position, paving the way for Nigeria's Dr. Okonjo-Iweala to be the next Director General and first woman in Africa to get the role. So again, we're waiting for full confirmation, but we're seeing folks out there already putting this story out that they're looking like they're going to withdraw her candidacy. And so that's our Africa update.
Well, on Dr. Okonjo-Iweala, we have already started celebrating. We're very optimistic.
Right.
Now, first on Priti Patel, I think she was involved with PNID before she got appointed as Home Secretary. And of course, you know how the PNID story has gone.
Yes.
The Nigerian government has shown a lot of due diligence in establishing that fraud is involved, and we've secured, victory during the preliminary process on at least 2 different occasions. But with regard to Priti Patel, she was recently accused of bullying our officials. This morning, I read that Prime Minister Boris Johnson has had to put out a memo to remind ministers and government officials that they have to respect people who work for them. And there is in place a ministerial code, although it's not legally binding,
right,
but it's some kind of guideline for ministers. I hope that something like that will also be provided here in Nigeria. It's something we can emulate, a code of conduct for people in positions of authority, particularly in government. What you see in government is that every small person with one small title suddenly becomes more important than the people who works with them. And, bullying is taken for granted here. And the bullying is not just, with subordinates, but also to people who need to do business with government. Now, on locally assembled vehicles, about a few years ago, about 48 companies applied to assemble vehicles locally. But I think at the moment we have just about 9 companies that are assembling vehicles in Nigeria, including Innocent, Hyundai, Honda, JAC, GIS, about 9 of them. And Volkswagen is also planning to come back into the business. But the question I ask has to do with the Nigerian automotive development industry bill. Now, that bill was passed as far back as 2017. But I don't think up to now, maybe you know the status, I don't think it's been assented to. In 2019, President Buhari rejected the bill because of certain concerns about the 10-year tax holiday that is to be offered people playing in that auto industry in Nigeria. Now, if we're going to encourage the assembling of cars in Nigeria, which was the case in the past, then of course there may be need to still give people in that industry incentives. And there was an argument at the time that Innocent should be patronized.
Yes.
And if that now happens, that's a major step forward. But isn't there a contradiction? In the finance bill that was presented by the Minister of Finance, I thought I read something about a reduction of import duty on imported finished cars from 35% to 10%. If on one hand you are saying you want to encourage local assembly of vehicles and ensure value addition, and then at the same time you reduce the tariff on the importation of vehicles from elsewhere, I don't know whether you consider that a contradiction. But I think in the long run, what Nigeria should be moving forward to is not just assembling cars in Nigeria and looking for local content in terms of furniture and labor. In some other countries, if Honda wants to bring Honda vehicles into Nigeria, then you come here and set up your factory. And that way, you create opportunities, you build your factory in Nigeria, and you create the kind of hub that we're told Volkswagen has signed a memorandum of understanding with the Nigerian government to create. But I would like you to respond to that question about the contradiction that I pointed out, whether it is or not.
Well, so it's not, because again, as I said, the annual demand is 720,000 approximately. And so out of that, you've got only about 14,000 of annual demand for vehicles that are locally assembled. So the gap is still huge, and as of this time, has to be addressed by imports. So until the capacity for the local production to increase, until we see that increase to a stage to where they can increase production much more, at that stage, you would now increase that tariff to discourage importation. But until we get there, since the bulk of the demand is being met by imports, a lot of people didn't like that tariff. It was too high. It was, the costs were being passed down to individuals that purchase those vehicles. So it's been welcomed, at least in the circles that I've been talking to. So until the local until the local production can show the capacity to increase it, I think it's a good move to reduce that tariff for now.
Unfortunately, I wanted to talk about Nigeria's automobile policy, a 10-year policy that we have, but we don't have time. Right. But just to give more context to your story on Priti Patel, she was the International Development Secretary under Theresa May and was forced to step down for having undocumented, untransparent, to put it lightly, meetings in Israel with their senior lobbyists and businessmen. So this is the kind of person that we have who decided to write this poison pen hatchet job against Nigeria in the wake of our Minister of Finance visiting the UK to advertise Nigeria as open for business. This lady decided to completely assault Nigeria, call us corrupt, inept, completely incompetent, and flouting international law over what Nigeria has described repeatedly as a scam. So just to give some context to what you were saying.
I would have loved to comment further on a couple of issues on Priti Patel and the automobile industry, but I have to let you go now because of the constraint of time. Thank you so much, Rotus, for that. We'll move on to Michael Wilson, joins us from London now. Michael, good morning.
Morning. We've got something rather unusual, actually, to tell you this morning. Since we last spoke, there's been a procession of good news. How unusual is that? First of all, AstraZeneca's COVID-19 vaccine, which I'll come on to the detail of a little bit later on, see how the markets, I know we're going to talk about vaccines, but this is how the markets look at it. PMIs also in Europe and the UK outperformed. But I think one of the more important things that happened yesterday was the announcement that President-elect Biden is going to appoint former Federal Reserve Chair Janet Yellen as Treasury Secretary. Now, this is a very significant move. It was very well received indeed. She got a lot of brownie points when she was heading the Federal Reserve. She's widely respected as an economist. She's expected to be pragmatic, and that, as far as the financial markets is concerned, means that she won't actually be clamping down on regulation, a new regulatory regime for banks, which Wall Street had actually feared. She's the first woman Fed chief. She'd also be the first woman Treasury Secretary. And obviously she faces these unprecedented challenges, getting the economy back in line. But fiscal stimulus will definitely, I think, be on the table for this new administration. It's going to be difficult, as we've said often in the past. Passing it through the Senate, which is ruled by the Republicans, will be a monumental task. So therefore, that added to Asia being quite optimistic this morning. Plus, it looks as though he hasn't actually said it in so many words, but President Trump has allowed the release of what are called transition funds, i.e. it means that Biden's administration has the money to sort of occupy administrative places before he actually officially takes over. And that helped Wall Street up a bit, this kind of rotation trade we've been talking about, out of tech stocks into the more traditional ones, as we appear to be getting back to normal. Sign for Asia to play follow-up, but in particular, Japan, Nikkei 225 up about 2.5%, catching up on a holiday yesterday. I haven't seen these highs since 1991. It was 40,000 in 1989, I think, before Japan plunged into 3 decades of deflation. But you know, it's quite positive stuff, really. South Korea up, Bangkok up, Singapore up, Malaysia too. The only one really was Greater China, which was a bit of an underperformer. But as we've said, no great worries there. And as far as Hong Kong's concerned, almost unchanged. So to recap on the US markets, then those PMIs, which sound very boring and dull, but actually they're good. They're good indicators, really, for market watchers about what people think about where an economy is going. And they were actually quite high, really, and they lifted equities into good post-COVID rotation trade again. And also, I mean, you'd have to ask this question, actually, as far as the United States is concerned. They call it growth over graves, you know, in other words, looking at economic growth rather than the human cost of the pandemic and so on. And you have to say that President Trump's laissez-faire attitude appears, I say appears, to have been quite successful. And it might be laying the grounds for a recovery in 2021 once vaccines become widely distributed. Let's look at the vaccines and just see where we are right now as far as the markets are concerned. I'm not a doctor or an expert in vaccines. I'm just telling you what the markets actually think about it. So the AstraZeneca and Oxford revealed their drug is 70% effective. Traders were certainly encouraged by that, even though there are the final details to go through. That headline figure of 70% effective is about the average for drugs. One of them, 62%, the other 90%. The medication, the Astra-Oxford one, reported to be a fraction of the cost of Moderna's and Pfizer-BioNTech's possible vaccines. And this is the most important thing. It can be stored at -3 degrees, and that helps transportation. So the pharma sector is actually doing quite well today. And if a vaccine gets approval for the regulators, even though it'll take time to roll out, we suspect to see a lot going on there. Here in the UK, Prime Minister Johnson confirmed that England's lockdown will last until early next month, but there will be a tougher the national lockdown will end early next month, but there'll be a tougher 3-tier system until next spring. It means that economic activity will pick up in certain regions. I have to say, businesses, my neighbours, fellow citizens are trying to work out exactly what it all means. It's very confusing, but that's the kind of world we live in, unfortunately. I'll just give you a quick one on commodities. Oil testing month highs up to about $45 a barrel as far as Brent crude's concerned. That's really just on the back of the markets rising. And gold, of course, by contrast, thus as we... there seems to be slightly less risk around. It's getting slightly weaker. We're looking at 18.24 an ounce this morning. So that's the commodity markets for you, and that's my global view. Good morning.
Okay, real quickly, Michael, in less than a minute, I want to talk about the meeting between Benjamin Netanyahu and the Saudi prince. Is this an indication that there might be trade between those two countries, Israel and Saudi Arabia, when you look at the antecedents? They talked about Iran too, but most importantly, the trade angle to that meeting. Any possibilities coming out of that?
Well, we see, won't we? I mean, I do feel as though this is the future, these kind of post-COVID unilateral or bilateral trade deals actually taking place. Both those economies looking to diversify in lots of different ways, just as a lot of oil-rich countries like Nigeria, for example, looking to diversify. I have to say, if what we're going to see, given that we've had trade agreements as far as China's concerned with its neighbours, shutting out the United States now blowing warm to another trade deal with China. These things are actually quite impressive, really. I think what we're going to see, I think that if you like, the effect of the pandemic has been to shake up a lot of previous attitudes towards trade, and it can only be healthy. I believe in globalism. I know it has its weaknesses, but as a person, I think the markets do as well. I think there's a lot of countries that once they open up and once they start to cooperate between themselves, it can only be good for their economies. And if it's good for their economies and education, most of all, that is the most important thing, as we well know, then that's good.
Well, thank you very much, Michael Wilson.
Great to have you back. For updates on COVID-19 pandemic, Aaron Akirjala joins us now. Aaron, great to have you. Good morning.
To you, Rufai. Yeah. Good morning to you, Doctor.
Good morning.
And Tundu, always a pleasure to see you every single day. And let's get started with the latest update in terms of COVID-19 globally. And looking at the world figures as of now, as of this morning, we've actually seen a major rise in the numbers of COVID-19 globally, as you can actually see there. From data gathered yesterday, in the last 24 hours, we've seen 528,263 added to the number to bring it to 59.2 million so far, which is actually accounts for a 6% rise in the last 14 days. And the deaths have actually crossed over 1 million, 1.3 to be precise. Yesterday, the deaths recorded were 8,420, which is up by 20% in the last 14 days. So you look at that, COVID-19 is still on the rise. And if we're to take a global look at how things are actually playing out, let's start it off from the World Health Organization. They've said on Monday that they have received reassurances from Beijing that the international experts will soon be able to travel to China to help investigate the animal's origin of COVID-19. That has been long in the works, and we are hoping that this actually is taken very seriously. Although the push is for a vaccine, but also the origins to this particular virus must be detected. Moving away from that, and let's cross over to England, where right now things are also looking pretty gloom. And the UK government have said that travelers arriving in England from abroad will face a shorter spell in quarantine from mid-December if they test negative for coronavirus 5 days after their arrival. This is what the government has announced this morning, and they are hoping that probably by April, they will be able to lift some of the restrictions fully on what is happening in the UK. While in France, we are seeing numbers actually go down. As a matter of fact, France actually reported 4,452 new COVID-19 cases, the lowest daily tally since the 28th of September, suggesting that a second national lockdown has been very impactful. The government have been really hard on how things actually were spiraling out of control, but thanks to this particular lockdown, is seemingly becoming effective. Now to Spain, where King Felipe VI started quarantining for 10 days after coming in close contact with someone who later tested positive for COVID-19. And this is what the palace has actually reported. We know the numbers also are rising heavily in Spain, and we actually hope he's okay. He has not shown any signs of or any symptoms of COVID-19 at the moment, but the palace are on high alert as we speak. And the Pope himself has spoken about those who are actually anti-maskers, so to speak, as has taken an aim against protests of those during the COVID-19 restriction, and contrasting them with healthy indignation as seen in demonstrations. He has spoken heavily about those people who think that wearing a face mask is not the best way out of COVID-19. And let's see how it actually goes. We're still watching how things actually play out in Italy. Italy, remember, used to be one of the hotspots of COVID-19, but it has seems abated a little. Now, since we're talking about COVID-19 and the virus, the news actually came out yesterday, and let's actually bring this one in, and that is the fact that is Dr. Sarah Gilbert, one of those who are in the front line of discovering a particular vaccine for the Oxford University, and she's been speaking and touting the efficacy of this particular vaccine, talking about the ChAdOx1. Now, let me actually bring it into context. What do we know about this vaccine? Because when you look at it closely, we know that it has shown 90% efficacy when a half a dose is given a month apart from a full dose. And also it has shown 62% efficacy when 2 doses are given a month apart. And it has shown, since we're talking about 2 doses here, those 2 doses, to an extent, some are saying up to 90%, but the efficacy averages about 70% at the moment. We know that it uses the adenovirus of a chimpanzee and combined with the COVID-19 genetic materials to be able to to be able to instigate immunity in people. And what is getting people excited about this vaccine, the ChAdOx1, is the fact that storage is not as difficult or as stringent as other vaccines. All right, you need your normal refrigerator temperatures to be able to store this vaccine. And at the moment, looking at it, 20,000 plus volunteers were used in the test of this. They had their own problems, but at the moment, they're showing that there's major efficacy cut across different age groups and different demographics, which is actually good news. Now, trying to explain it even further, this is how that particular vaccine, talking about the AstraZeneca vaccine, the Chadox 1, actually works. Of course, we saw that the scientists actually take a spike protein from the coronavirus and actually modify it and alter it so that it becomes harmless, and they now make it into a vaccine, and it's now actually injected into the body. If they can help us with the next slide, when it's injected into the body, immediately it begins to form its own, it begins to go straight to work, and what it does is the vaccine enters the cells, then actually starts to produce the coronavirus spike, and this prompts an immune system so that at the moment, anytime anybody that actually has a vaccine, like that can be seen, as you can see there, actually comes in contact with coronavirus, or actually comes close to someone who has coronavirus, the body immediately triggers antibodies and the T cells that actually triggers the fight against the coronavirus. We're hoping this is actually effective, but if you put it side by side with all the vaccines we've been hearing in the last couple of days and weeks, putting them side by side, looking at the efficacy level, it is still lower than that of the Pfizer-BioNTech and Moderna zone. You can see there, theirs is up to 90%, while Pfizer is 95%, Moderna is 94.5%. While Moderna and Pfizer are using a completely new technology in this manufacturing of the vaccine, when you look at the rest of them, we told you that the Oxford AstraZeneca actually uses the adenovirus of a chimpanzee. Others need 2 doses, but to be able to get 90% efficacy, Oxford AstraZeneca needs 1.5, a half a dose first, and a month later, then 1 full dose. And they've not published any side effects, but like we've seen from the Pfizer zone, it causes fevers, chills, and some body aches, while for Moderna, short-lived fatigues, headache, and pain. And what is getting everyone excited, especially those in the UK, is the fact that it takes about $3 to $4 to be able to get one, while for the Pfizer zone, it takes about $20, and the Moderna zone, it takes about $32. Okay. So that is actually what it is, though.
Okay, Aaron, I can know why what is it called, vaccine, the Moderna and the Pfizer are really expensive. Because of the technology they're using, the messenger RNA technology.
Yeah.
Normally, when you look at vaccines all over the world, vaccines are normally made by attenuated viruses, viruses that have been weakened, not like the other viruses, just a weakened form of that same virus. That's what is the old long method that the Oxford and AstraZeneca is using, and that's why the cost is obviously cheaper, because that's a new technology. But what is instructive here is the reaction, and the reaction, for me, I'm still a little bit skeptical, because I want to see a lot of peer review on this. I don't think we have enough peer review.
No, most of them don't have peer reviews at the moment.
So I want to see a lot of peer review on this, maybe from my scientific background before I call it on there. But the reaction really on the body and the reactions that has hit the market as regards this virus are really exciting. But for me, once I don't see those peer reviews, I can't call it, because you see, taking a nucleated sample size that has placebo and virus is quite different from a general sample size. And for me, when you look at that strategically, it's really of importance. But good news and cheering news.
And
let me just put it here, because the big question mark is this. Somebody was given, they said it was the placebo of this AstraZeneca vaccine that was given in Brazil sometime in September or so, and the person actually died. The company did not comment about this, and they were still given a green light to go on testing. But that was, they said that it was a paper that actually published this in Brazil.
But generally, it's great news that we're moving closer to ending COVID with all these vaccines coming up. And I'm sure that the scientific community will go through the basic protocol, because there's a protocol in place before you can get any authorization. But the good news about the AstraZeneca vaccine is that it is £3. And that should be great news for low-income and developing countries. And we've been told that, billions of the doses will be made available, particularly for the benefit of developing countries. And AstraZeneca is also talking to the COVAX Alliance to see how low-income and developing countries can be helped. Thank you very much, Aaron.